Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Chris Herrmann, a library associate at the Bowie Branch in the Youth Services Department, and we are here tonight with Eden Appiah-Kubi, author of The Bennett Women. So, welcome, Eden.
Thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, and we're just going to start off with a quick land acknowledgement. So, as residents of Prince George's County, we acknowledge that we gather on the traditional lands of the Matapiniat, the Tuxant, Piscataway, the Moyon, the Munki, and the Akokik, present and past, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it through the generations. This calls us to commit to continue to learn better steward the lands ourselves that we inhabit. And so, Eden Appiah-Kubi fell in love with fell in love with classic novels in fourth grade when her mom read her Jane Eyre, chapter by chapter, as a bedtime story. She's an alumni of a small New England university with a weird mascot, Bo Jumbos, and a former Peace Corps volunteer. Eden developed her fiction writing through years spent in a small Washington, D.C. critique group. Today, she works as a librarian and lives in the D.C. suburbs with her husband and hilarious daughter. So, The Bennett Women is basically a delightfully modern spin on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, where love is a goal, marriage is a distant option, and self-discovery is a sure thing. Welcome to Bennet House, the only all-women's dorm at prestigious Longbourn University, home to three close friends who are about to have an eventful year. EJ is an ambitious Black engineering student. Her best friend Jamie is a newly out trans woman studying French and theater. Tessa is a Filipina astronomy major with guy trouble. For them, Bennet House is more than a residence. It's an oasis of feminism, femininity, and enlightenment. But as great as Longbourn is for academics, EJ knows it can be a wretched place to find love. Yet the fall season is young and brimming with surprising possibilities. Jamie's prospect is Lee Gregory, son of a Hollywood producer and a gentleman so charming he practically sparkles. That leaves EJ with Lee's arrogant best friend, Will. For Jamie's sake, EJ must put up with the disagreeable but distressingly handsome, not quite famous TV actor for as long as she can. What of it? EJ has her eyes on a bigger prize anyway, launching a spectacular engineering career in the, quote, real world she's been hearing so much about. But what happens when all of their lives become entwined in ways no one could have predicted, and EJ finds herself drawn to a man who's not exactly a perfect fit for the future she did have planned? And welcome, Eden.
Hello. So I don't think I've heard the whole thing read before. So yeah, a lot goes down.
Awesome. So I guess the first question we have was the novel always going to be a modern take on Pride and Prejudice?
I think it had to be. So the inspiration came from a writing exercise from a critique group I was in back in the Bush era, to date myself. So in this group, we would gather in people's living rooms, and the person who hosted got to choose the critique, the prompt. And that night, the prompt was rewrite a scene from classic literature. And mine went right back to AP English and Pride and Prejudice, and I went to the proposal scene. And I wrote a quick scene, like instead of a dorm room, between EJ, who was always a hardworking RA, and at that time, Will was the head of the a cappella group on campus.
Okay.
In that version, long ago. And so I wrote that draft and wrote that sort of short scene, and then I expanded it a couple of meetings later. And my group was like, so we need you to put away the YA novel you've been working on and do this. Write this. And that was the story that I wanted to be written. And so it started from being a modern take on Pride and Prejudice. And when I was trying to think just in that moment of what has sort of the class issues and the sort of village atmosphere of 19th century English village, I immediately thought of a college campus, a sort of elite college campus where you rarely have that people who have that much income disparity, but gentility and also strange traditions, weird mascots, all together in one place. And so I was like, that's my English village. Okay, let's go.
Okay. And so what books shaped your path as you were writing this, along with obviously Jane Austen?
Well, it's funny. The first draft of this read a lot like Cold Comfort Farm. I was really into these sort of comic, sort of 1920s novels that were full of, sort of, or Jeeves and Wooster, this kind of slapstick kind of things. But I'm funny, but that's not my funny. So I had to think a little bit differently. And then when I got my agent through a Twitter competition, which was amazing. And my first draft of the novel was written third person omniscient, which no one really reads anymore. So I had to do a rewrite, and I was reading Game of Thrones. And so even though it wasn't sort of your typical contemporary fiction convention, I immediately thought I need to do multi-voiced third person limited. And so that's sort of where the structure came from, was reading my fantasy novel and then sort of applying it to my fantasy of college life.
Okay.
So I'd say those were the two biggest influences on the early parts of the novel and shaping it to be what it became.
Interesting. Cool. And so what is your writing process? And has it been the same for this novel as it has been for past and future projects, or do you just kind of change it up depending on what you're working on?
Well, this was my very first novel, like the first one I ever wrote. I was just seeing what happened, and so my process was I depended heavily on my critique group. I would write 50 pages, get my turn to get critiqued, get a lot of good feedback and a lot of cut this, don't use that makes no sense, and then go back, revise, and then write another 50 pages. That was sort of my process for 3 years. And that worked well when you have a lot of where you're writing without a deadline and you have time and space to really develop ideas like that. Mm-hmm. Currently, I have a novel due in a year.
Congratulations.
So, I'm very happy, but I've also never written a novel under deadline, and so I'm working with an outline for the first time in my life. And I actually had some great advice. I was fortunate to be chosen for the DV debut program, which is Diverse Voices debut program by Diverse Voices Inc. And they pair an experienced author of color with a debuting author of color to guide them through. Now you've actually getting your book published. You make sure you survive it, basically. And my mentor is the wonderful Denise Williams, who wrote what just came out, How to Fail at The Fastest Way to Fall, which just came out last week, and How to Fail at Flirting. We're both in the romance space. And she gave me a couple of really great tips because she's prolific. She's on to the next project in a way that I need to learn to be. And she told me about this book called Romancing the Beat, which is sort of, a lot of people in the fiction talk about Save the Cat as the book they use to learn how to plot for basically thrillers, all sorts of different kinds of fiction. But romance, which is where I feel like is more my home, has different genre beats and different expectations. And Romancing the Beat gives a more of a structure for those kind of books. And it gave me an outline structure that I did not feel restricted by. And so I'm adapting, and I'm actually trying to write steadily every day. So basically, I make myself try and write an hour a day at a time. Sometimes it's now that I'm going back to work more often, it happens a lot on the train and by hand, and has to be transcribed, but at least I have ideas out. And sometimes, less often than I like, it happens actually at a keyboard. But the first draft of the Bennett Women got written mostly by train, so that part feels familiar, and so I embrace that.
Okay. So one thing I really liked about the novel is there was really an effervescent joy to all the characters. Even when they're hurting or struggling through negative emotions, they pull themselves through it, whether internally with themselves or with advice from family or friends. And it kind of felt like it was a blend of strength and hope, as with within women? And was that like intentional? Was it something you wanted to really put into the as like the backbone of the novel, or?
I did. The first, I knew that when I was expanding this, that for me, I wanted to have the friendships between the women be almost as strong as the romance that I was trying to put in the story, and that's why it's called Bennet House, because they're found family in the storm. Instead of being Bennett sisters who are by blood, they're sisters through love and experience. And I especially the joy was hugely important to me because writing about Black women, writing about trans women, writing about women of color in general, you often pick up a book and you brace yourself for the terrible thing that's going to happen to the person that you identify with. Like I love classic literature. I sort of call it literary landmines. Where am I going to hear a slur? Where I'm going to hear some terrible thing. And I wanted to give my reader a space to just enjoy the book, just enjoy like living in the story, especially people who identify with the woman on the cover. And so having the happiness, you're going through some difficulties, but there's always joy within that, and that's how you push through. So the joy mixed with the life experience was a huge part to me.
Okay. Yeah. When I was reading it, I was actually reminded of Ayanna Mathis. She wrote The 12 Tribes of Hattie, and she has a great essay. I think it might still be online somewhere, but it was just on trying to lean into, like, kind of within her writing process, learning to lean into writing joy. Because like you said, when you have marginalized characters and people's experiences, unfortunately, within publishing, they still want, well, what kind of overcoming adversity story can you tell me, rather than why can't it just be about these people living their life, finding love, finding happiness, or just living life but not piling on the pain. So I really like that you were able to transcend beyond that.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that.
When did you want to read?
Oh yeah,
now, or I was just thinking about that. I kind of jumped ahead.
Well, this is actually my first time reading, so I'm really excited. And usually people read from us early in the book, but I'm kind of in the middle. But I feel like this particular section is sort of made for this audience. So I'm going to be reading from my character is coming home for Thanksgiving break. It's how EJ goes home. Going from a small New England town to DC suburbs was a little like going from Kansas to Oz. Everything was a little brighter and louder. Life felt like it was in Technicolor by comparison. EJ released a sigh she didn't know she was holding when the train pulled into New Carrollton Station. The stop was in Prince George's County, one of the wealthiest majority Black counties in the country. Her parents had wanted to raise her to make sure EJ saw Black doctors, Black lawyers, and Black school principals in her daily life. They wanted her and Maya to dream freely. It worked. Both EJ and Maya grew up to want difficult but wonderful things. At Hertfordshire Station, EJ had been the only Black face in the place and the only person of color not behind the concessions counter. By the time her train reached Baltimore, she could see others like her, Black kids coming home from their fancy northern schools. Just in her train car, there was a bassist from Berklee College of Music and twin first-generation Nigerian guys in Princeton sweatshirts. EJ walked briskly to the taxi stand, feeling wonderfully inconspicuous. In the cab, EJ gave her address and asked her driver to go overland. Her parents would always offer to pick her up from the train station, but she liked having the 20 minutes of the drive to exhale, to really let the feeling sink in. She was home.
So you had said that scene had a lot of significance, obviously, as we're coming to from PG County, and you had PG County be EJ's home base. EJ and her older sister Maya later go to the New Deal Cafe, assuming that's the one in Greenbelt.
Right. Well, they opt not to, instead go to the Board and Brew.
Okay. Yeah. So was that intentional to pay like homage to the community that you know of and you grew up in?
It was. I also, just to highlight, it's a very. When I went away from school, I learned that just growing up here makes you different. And And it's a unique perspective that I think is not really shown often. The sort of a middle class Black experience is not that's also not a minority experience. That's not isolated to one section of town, or worrying about crossing the wrong border within your locality. And also, EJ is middle class in taste and gentility, but she has two educated parents. So, she has her financial struggles are real too. So I wanted to have someone living in that real middle of like having aspirations, but living a more simple, I don't want to say humble, but like more ordinary life, and like but moving through extraordinary circles, if you will. And so having someone, one, like being from here, I couldn't see any other way. I literally took that train trip myself. So, but also I just think it's a perspective that I wanted to make sure it was out there in the world. To paraphrase the great Toni Morrison, if you don't see the book you want to read, you have to write it. And so I knew when I was getting a chance of putting a character that I wanted to make a dark-skinned, dorky heroine. And so I was like, why not give her, a very specific point of view as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that she's surrounded by other characters who, like, they're also marginalized people, but they might be well-meaning in some instances, but they're a bit more privileged when it comes to class.
Yeah. So there's lots of different ways. I tried to write this book where the diversity felt natural because I sort of, again, reflecting my experiences. I had I call it, again, dating myself, United Colors of Benetton Friendships in college. And, you find out that like this person is like from the richest suburb in New Jersey, and this person's family is military, and they are working two jobs, and it can all exist in the same place. And there's often, when you think of college students, we often like sort of slap a uniform idea of like what that experience is like. But there's every kind of diversity on a college campus, the same there is on a city. It's just that we don't often think about people having different experiences because people show up to football games, or in my case, probably quiz matches, T3 school, not so much with football. But, the unifying experiences are what people focus on in college, but people are still bringing their diverse experiences to the campus. So I wanted to have the different kinds of diversity in orientation and gender and gender expression, and every kind of diversity you can have. It's including economic, because I think that Pride and Prejudice is a marriage, like I was sort of I was beating up the romance, but I didn't want to lose the marriage plot. I didn't want to lose the economics that made the original novel, really interesting. Because the reason that we pick it up and keep reading is because, like, if these girls don't get married, it's gonna be a Wharton novel. It's gonna be terrible.
Yeah, no sleds down the hill. And so on that, like with the college campus setting, with all the different people coming together from different life experiences, can you speak on EJ, Jamie, and Tessa's friendship and relationship to each other as women? They kind of know when to push each other, but when to kind of just lay back and be a sympathetic ear to each other.
Sure. So I wanted to set it in college because I feel like college is when you start really forming your relationships with your peers yourself. Often, like, their circumstances will do it for you almost all the way through high school. You're thrown together through like the people that you'd be closest to through clubs or other things. And in college, you're really getting to choose who you associate with and why, and then how, and then you're living with people every day. So what exactly those relationships look like. And these three have a healthy, loving friendship that they had to develop. They have, I like to include their little traditions of, they learned to vent together. They learned how to push each other. They also share similar goals. Tessa is an astrophysics major. Jamie's a double major. So they all are pretty driven. And they've learned, they are friends who you can see who do listen to each other and have learned to communicate with each other over the time that they've known each other. And I wanted to try and build that in to see the architecture of that friendship. Like, you know, it took building, it took learning how to talk to each other and what to ask to each other and when to push. Like, you know, when EJ goes to get her hair done from Tessa, and Tessa's talking about her awful boyfriend, EJ knows not to give her full opinion because it's only so helpful. But like, you know, she's learned to like what her friend needs to support, and so she's gonna support. And just sort of the little ways that we learn to show love in friendships, and those are ones that like sustain us and keep us. And I want these to be sustaining, non-competitive friendships in the story.
Yeah. I think it was interesting with kind of going back to what we were talking about before. There's also a really deft touch in the way that the characters deal with like low-key discriminatory slights or microaggressions, whether it's EJ dealing with racial stereotypes from guys she barely knows, from dorm residents, or the school board, to Jamie second guessing herself on her relationship, just basics, when she is existing as a trans woman in a cisgender centered world. And then even like later in the novel, I'm not going to spoil or anything, but when EJ's father gives another character a very honest talk on what it's like to exist and then physically travel through America as a Black woman. It's a lot of intensity for the characters, but you have a really light touch with it, and you, like you said, we don't. It's not hammered over the head, but it's just presented very honestly. But then with the characters loving and supporting each other, and it was honestly something I wasn't expecting to see in a romance. This was honestly the first romance I've read, probably in many a year.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious what your thought process was with it.
Well, I have to be honest. Like, it's a romance that I was so attached to my friendships, I couldn't let them go. So the novel might be a little bit longer than it should be, just because it has both. But wait, no, let me take a step back, because I did think when I was writing this that the relationship, the sisterhood has to be there to give it the Pride and Prejudice feeling. I have to build that and make that lived in and earned. And also the romance has to be there. It also has to be lived in and earned. And so I think that showcasing both was important. It's probably more so than you get in your average romance, but those were my goals. When I was trying to translate Pride and Prejudice into the modern day, I think, you know, it's probably more of a swirl or a sprinkle of Pride and Prejudice than a true retelling. I think that if you go in knowing that you're and not taking a retelling, you like the book works for you a bit better. But with the microaggressions and that kind of thing, that's just life. That's just, you know, that's the stuff that, you know, until quite recently people just lived with and didn't talk about. And so I wanted it to be, I didn't want to have characters with these identities and then, you know, color them in and then, you know, pretend like that did not affect the way they move through the world, because it does. And I firmly believe that books are empathy machines. It's one of the reasons I was over here. Like, you get to be in someone else's skin and someone's experience and see the world through their eyes. And I felt like I would be doing a disservice even if I'm doing the lightest and, you know, least fraught take of these lives, to not show that how these kind of factors affect the person or impact their day to day. So it felt like, once I decided, like, these are characters, this is the story I'm telling, that I had to tell the whole story. And I think that's how you write any kind of diversity. Like, if you commit to telling the whole story, then you can have inclusion, like different kinds of inclusion in your fiction, and know that you're not going to offend someone because you created a character, not a you know, a beautiful Barbie doll to make your central story more interesting.
Yeah. It was just, you know, I really liked the moments where they would just like I said, have each other's back, whether it was through like kind of unburdening of what they just experience, and then they just lifted each other up, supported each other, and made some crack about the idiot who just said the completely like bigoted or insensitive thing. There was some really nice moments in there.
The waffles helped too. That's what he did over
Yeah.
waffles.
I think we have a question from Brian. Was it hard to weave the intricate relationships of the women and the things that women of color face?
Well, I tell you, it was easy to write, hard to figure out what to include to make sure that the novel wasn't overburdened. So, there were sections it's sometimes when you write a novel and you forget what was on the cutting room floor. So there's a Halloween party that was there. That's a good chapter that had to be gone that sort of illustrates some things for EJ. And there's my darling Tessa. I love her so much, and so much of her story got put on the cutting room floor because, again, I was writing like Game of Thrones, so she had several chapters that sort of dealt with sizeism and sort of classism with her boyfriend, and they again got on the cutting room floor because I had to focus on EJ's story, and I really got attached to them, but I think it still helped me write the characters with warmth, and I held them in my heart, so like putting their feelings and emotions in their perspective became easier, even though I couldn't keep in everything I wanted.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. And I will admit, I think midway through, I was kind of hoping for a flashback to how they all met freshman year, but
there again, there was once for EJ and Jamie, but then again, it's like, okay, you gotta keep it moving.
Yeah. It was also interesting that the characters in the novel, at certain points, they conceal in order to, as they think it is protecting someone else, whether it's EJ's parents and their full reason for supporting her path of engineering over dance, and Will initially not telling EJ his whole history. What do you think are the risks that we take in concealing emotions to guard someone else's feelings, whether it's for good intentions or, as other characters prove, more malicious reasons?
Well, for people who have truly good intentions, it puts a limit on how well you can know and be known. Honestly, I think that was the sort of tragedy with EJ's relationship with her parents, is that like the information she got from them changed how she saw them, and changed how she thought of her upbringing. And when I mean, it's hard. It's going to be a risk either way. And, there's certain pain that like, seems like you can't live with. If you can't imagine living with the pain of dealing with your angry 16-year-old. I know as a parent right now, I'm trying to be a really open parent in a lot of things, a 5-year-old. But I can imagine if I thought that there was going to be some harm to my child I could prevent, then I would have to eat the pain. But I think that it does limit things, and you cannot control the impact that it has. You cannot control the reverberations, and you can think you have an idea and be prepared for them, but you just don't know. And so it's sort of building a house with a crack in the frame, with a crack in the foundation, or it may be a small crack, it may be something that like or it sinks but only after 50 years, or your basement falls in. You don't know, so it's a risky run.
Yeah, it was interesting the moments with EJ and her parents, where there's the times when she kind of realizes that she's right back of being almost like emotionally being a kid again, but then realizing that they're both adults, and so they are trying to speak to each other as adults with the wounds of childhood still kind of there.
Well, I just remember in that, especially in the early adulthood, it is so easy to slip back into the high school role because you've been being there, being your parents' kid, just like a listening, protesting in that particular way kid for much longer than you learn to be an adult with them. And I think that, having on this side of adulthood where I'm also a parent too, like adult relationships with your parents can be really beautiful. You can make jokes with them and, it's really fun. But when you're a kid and it's almost adversarial because parents are still authority, it takes a while to learn to lose that mentality while maintaining the respect. Like you still have to respect your parents your whole life, but they now are, advisors and not overlords. Overlords is strong. I mean, depending on your parent. I had a great mom. So, but just that the flip of switch of I can do what I want comes first, and then what you do with that power comes later. And I feel like that those years, especially 22 to 25, it's a heck of a time in a lot of young adults' lives with the relationship with parents and other adults. And I think, you just have to. It is honestly a choice. It's like you get to choose how much you want to stay in that position of feeling anger or even if it's justified, or deciding what kind of relationship you wanted. It is a choice. And when you're an adult, you realize that you get to make that choice. You don't just have to be mad because your parent used their authority in a certain way you didn't like back then, because you're an adult now and you can do what you want with that information. And so I wanted to highlight the power that you have when you're, coming into your adulthood. Like it really is your life. And that means a lot of things. Some things are easier and some things are harder. The decisions are all yours, for better or for worse.
Yeah, it felt like by the end that EJ and her parents had a more balanced relationship with that than maybe like Jamie and her mom in some ways.
Yeah, and I wanted to write, especially with portraying Black parents that could talk to each other. I wanted that on the page too, because people, not every movie, but a lot of movies give Black parents to be very authoritarian, and and things only get solved by yelling at Thanksgiving after 4 years, and that wasn't my experience. And that you can talk to each other. Those conversations can be hard, but it does happen. And so I wanted to have healthy parental relationships, even though it wasn't really accurate to Mrs. Bennet in the novel. But I'm a Mrs. Bennet defender, so.
Oh yeah, that was interesting. That kind of kept thinking the parents are, parenting her on two levels as their individual daughter, but then what it means to be a Black woman trying to succeed in both, this country, in college, and in that was there a point of kind of putting EJ in that kind of struggle between wanting a obviously successful career that could do outward help for the world with addressing building structure within climate change, and then her wanting to return to her dreams of artistry and being a dancer?
Well, I wanted to. There are different versions. Again, there's so many drafts. I didn't want to. It felt like a bridge too far to have EJ go back entirely and sort of throw everything she built away and dance again. But I wanted her to be able to find that love again, because even if I wanted to have in the story that you can love something and not have to make money from it, and it can still be in your life, which is, I feel like a lot of things. I feel like my generation, millennials, have to sort of we try to be good at a lot of stuff, and didn't know what to do when it was not graded or towards something, and just sort of like just to be able to enjoy the thing that you love is a gift. And when you, again, choices that adults can make, when you are making your own career, you can choose to make time for the things that you love. You can choose to say, like, I love dance, and so I'm going to take dance classes. I love writing, and so I'm going to join critique groups, even though, like, my writing career, because I wanted to be a journalist, didn't go the way I planned.
Yeah. So there was an early scene in the novel. This was one of my favorite. Was the meteor shower party? Can you speak on like how you conceived that scene? And I will admit, it has been probably over 15 years since I've read Pride and Prejudice. So was that a nod to that, or was it its own?
No,
Okay.
that was I brought that to the table. So that was a favorite memory of mine from college. My freshman year was there was a media shower, and we all took our my university was on a big hill, and we took our pillows, and like it was November, it was so cold, and everyone grabbed their bedding and went to a roof and waited until the media shower came, and it was this. I didn't know. I had been. It was the first time I sort of felt my college experience, because it was early in my time in campus, and it was just interesting. We were all gathered to stare at the stars, just be filled with wonder. And I felt something tender for all those people freezing on the roof with me, just to watch stars streaking the sky. And I think it's the only meteor shower I've seen, so it stuck with me as a memory.
Mm. Yeah. It was a really good setting, I think, for like the kind of first breakdown or kind of set up that there could be something more between EJ and Will, when she's realizing, well, maybe he's not quite the jerk I thought he was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, Brian is asking, was there a big need to empower your characters, especially with them being set in contemporary settings?
Oh my goodness, yes. So the big question is, if this is a Pride and Prejudice retelling in the 21st century, we don't need to get married to not starve. So what's happening here? And is it? I didn't want to write a story where it's just like the clever girl gets the rich man. Like, I wanted to write a story where people really changed their mind around each other, and they had the freedom to do that. And so to do that, again, I wanted to build up EJ's career skills and her prospects on her own terms. Like, yes, she had student loans. Yes, she needed to make money when she couldn't just go to France and hope for the best. But she still had the capability of building herself up with what she developed in college, no matter what happened. And any romantic pairing was going to bring her love and support, and a good relationship, and that was its own reward. So just the idea that she could have both, and I really wanted her to have both. Spoiler for it, because happy romances are happy ever after. So I guess that's there's happiness for EJ at the end of this book. But it was important to me, because I did go back and forth of if I wanted to have a career victory or just a romantic victory. And I was sort of like, it's fiction. It doesn't have to be realistic. I can my Black girl can win all around. So and she finds her own victories in the different spheres she's working in her own way. And also, everything grows with them too, because I don't think everything's handed to her. I didn't want to have things where just like, Deus Ex Machina, she just has the thing. I tried to make it sweat equity for both the relationship and her victories in the career sphere.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting, kind of going along with her, where she's, completely confident, completely pushes herself, but then she has these little moments where she doubts herself, but then she just gets right back up and keeps going at it. And it was interesting seeing that kind of like, I mean, and I'm not sure if it was intentional, but it was almost like she kind of starts rubbing off on Will when he's just very moping and, kind of is in shambles with his personal life and his career. And she just kind of, just as they get to know each other, she just pushes him to be better, kind of.
Well, I feel like the best relationships make you better. I want to have them grow because of each other. I feel like that does happen in the novel in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. There's so much other stuff happening with runaway little sisters and inheritances that it's sometimes it's hard to see, but the two characters do look at their perspectives and how they go through the world and think about things differently because of each other and how they treat each other and what they've learned about each other. And I think that is that's when you can see a relationship that might last. And I also want to build that in because they're both young, and for this to be more than a year thing, there has to be some depth there. Otherwise it's sort of like, oh, this is a cute summer, have fun, guys. But I wanted to give the possibility you can imagine a forever on the page.
Yeah. If we have any other questions popping up, did you want to read another passage?
Actually, well, since you're talking about, I'll read from the my favorite passage from the book is from the star section.
Okay.
And so I will read. It's brief, but this is the one thing that has not changed from the first draft. So it's we're on the roof for stargazing, and we're at AJ's perspective as it looks like things are about to begin. EJ turned and looked at Will briefly, then looked back at the sky. She was thinking about supernovas, how they burn brighter than whole galaxies, how the remnants of long-dead stars hung in the universe like glowing ghosts. She thought of how cultures long ago had looked at the stars and seen gods. Mostly, she thought of the hugeness, the vastness of it all. It gave her scale to her many plans and decisions. Even if she messed everything up, the stars would be the stars. And that she found a peace that generally eluded her. Isn't it wonderful, she said quietly, how little we matter? Almost simultaneously, the roof gave a collective gasp. Showtime, EJ whispered happily as the first streak of light crossed the sky.
Awesome. No. Yeah, there really kind of is nothing like the night sky to just make you kind of look up and realize how insignificant, but then how huge kind of each individual person is. Mm-hmm. Especially if you can get a place without a lot of light pollution. Kyla says that she's really excited to read this, and she might have an idea for everyone's Christmas present. So that's good, Kyla. It's also going into one of the other main relationships in the novel. It was really interesting with the complete acceptance and kind of adorableness of Jamie and Lee's relationship, that he just embraces her as who she is unconditionally. Again, not to spoil a bit, but she has a reflection later on in the novel about joining more of the LGBT community in Washington, D.C., and that kind of, it brought me back a bit to reality, where there is, unfortunately, a very high rate of violence against Black trans women in the DMV, and then nationally, we're seeing a lot of attacks on trans kids' healthcare and attempts to ban books that deal with both racial and trans lives. And so it was really hopeful and kind of heartful to see that relationship between Jamie and Lee just be loving and accepting and caring. And, they pricked at each other, but that's just any basic relationship issues where they're learning to communicate more thoroughly with each other. So I was just curious what that led to that.
Well,
second relationship.
As I said before, I wanted to with my trans character especially, not write something where you had to wince. You know, it's hard being a Black woman in a lot of media, but it's really hard to be a trans woman in a lot of media where like you almost exist for violence. And I was just sort of like, no, I refuse out. And, you know, I was waiting for pushback from editors or anything like that. And it's like, Jamie's going to have normal relationship problems, and that's enough. You know, and, you know, she's going to have her fears of the world, and that's enough. And I like, there was enough space, I think, even in the story to give her, to, you know, to, again, when I explore things, I want to explore things thoroughly. So even if anything was a 10th word difficult, it would require more space to explore that I don't think the story would have allowed. So one, I didn't want it to happen. Like, you know, trans people are represented enough, period. Let my trans women have some fun and a nice boyfriend, you know, because there's enough to worry about. And so my main goal was just, again, empathy machine, showing, you know, her heart flutters, that her, you know, she gets ready, that she wears awkward Halloween costumes to please her boyfriend. you know, just, I want her seen first.
Mm-hmm.
That was the most important thing to me.
Yeah, their relationship was really cute. I really liked it. And
also, as a parallel to Jane and Bingley's relationship, you know, there's, you know, we're focused on Lizzie and Darcy for a reason in the book. Mm-hmm. You know, she's also very cute. You know, it's great when it's great. It's not when it's not, and then it's great again in like the last pages. So spoilers for Pride and Prejudice.
Okay, Elizabeth says that she's super excited to read, and she loved the original Pride and Prejudice and loves the idea of this new take.
Thank you.
And Brian definitely likes the added local references, which, yeah, it's really nice to see some DMV representation. And Nancy is super excited just to be here. So is there a favorite character you have in the novel, or was it just kind of different at different points when you were writing it?
I mean, I love my main character. I had so much fun writing her. I wanted so much for her, and I think I was able to give. I'm really happy. The thing that killed me is I like Will, and I did not. But I'm like, I've got to write it so that, you know, you can see if I make a character that I think is great, she has to end up with someone great, not just because the book says not just with someone, and that person must be great, not just because the book has labeled him as great, but he actually has to show that side to himself. So I had to write Will in a way that I would enjoy spending time with him, and I think I made him a little funny and a little weird, and so I'm very happy. I think again, places that's taking pushback, making EJ, you know, dorky, thick, nerdy, dark skin all at the same time, because you usually just get one, even if it's even if your Black character is the main character, you're like, you know, because representation is so hard. The fact I got to balance more than one thing is super great to me. But in terms of who I want to do a road trip with, I think, or Tessa is just one of my, like, I think I had the most fun writing her scenes, just because she was my firecracker. She was the person who let you know, and I wanted to have a side character that wasn't just there to advise the leads. Like, she has her own thing she wants. She wants Will's autograph. She wants to, you know, she has her own ambitions, and I wanted to provide those glimpses of her life. And so I feel like I succeeded in making everyone a whole person. At least that's my hope. But I love EJ. I love Tessa.
Cool. Do you have advice for any other writers that are looking to tell stories outside of their own experiences?
Um, I guess the two biggest things that I would say is um, write your story. Someone needs to hear it, and get it out, and then let people tell you no afterwards. But get your story out there. Like, maybe it's now, maybe it's in 5 years. I started this novel in 2011, my critique group. I got my agent in 2016, went to 3 rounds of submissions, and the very last people we asked said yes. So anything can happen. And I would say two, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Like I said, the first version of this novel was a lot like Cold Comfort Farm and like slapstick, and it was a very different tone than this novel came. But I still love this version. If I just thought that my very first version of my novel, which no one's very first version of their novel is the greatest thing ever. But if I just clung to the ideas or clung to my third person omniscient, I wouldn't be here. And I feel like that was a small price to play to get EJ in the world. So, don't give up your voice, but think about what compromises can be made to get your story out there in the world, because someone needs your story.
Are there any fun library memories you have, and like anything that you can see as like little roots that led to this book?
Well, my goodness, my mom, again, growing up, took me. We would come from church to New Carrollton Library every Sunday when I was a kid, and I would pick out books every week. And I went through. Again, I had a very kind mother who let me come out with stacks of things. So 1 week would be like all the Betty and Veronica comics I could physically carry. Another week would be all the Judy Blume. Another week would be I read through all the Louisa May Alcott that the library had. I'm probably one of the people who read Little Men before I read Little Women. And also I read lots of classics there. But just getting to spend hours picking up my books Sunday afternoon to the library, and then gobbling them down during the week so I could do it all again. And then, I have many good library memories. I remember getting my senior quote from the reference section. We are the music makers. We are dreaming our dreams. We are the music makers. Okay. I remember looking for scholarships on the computers after school and doing my homework. The library was a really great place for me. I loved it, and it was a really, I think, it supported my broad interest, because if I was, Agatha Christie novels, like classic novels, comics, anything I wanted to get into, it was there. If I had time and the inclination, I could just hang out in the library and explore. And again, for someone, again, I had a teacher mom, like, it wasn't a ton of money. It wasn't like all the camps, but, time to explore in the library did a ton for me.
That's great. So what can libraries do to support books and writers of Black and other POC romance titles, especially when we're seeing kind of a uptick return of book bans and challenges?
Well, I mean, I guess you shoot for volume. Just like try and include as many different kinds of experience you can in your list. Sometimes maybe it's ebooks, maybe it's audiobooks. There's so many different formats are available. Maybe it's even magazines, or maybe specialized book sales. But I think that things will be challenged because people are uncomfortable, but getting authors in. Hi, I'm again happy to be here. giving opportunities to connect when we're able to connect more in the real world, getting different kinds of formats. People can be touched by things that change minds, and then changed minds can change lives.
Yeah. Brian is asking, what character reflects you, or did you put yourself into?
Okay, I think, to be fair, I split myself between EJ and Tessa. I think I put my interests and my I think EJ's cooler than me, but I gave her like my interest in theater, my interest in dance, and a lot of my experiences. And I think I gave Tessa more of my personality, sort of, because I was sort of the Tessa of my dorm, and I have what's a really cool sophomore friends who sort of were my entree to campus life, and you know, and I was the spunky kid sister of that group, and so I felt like I gave Tessa my personality that way, but then EJ is more of who I'd like to be.
Cool. Are there? Let's see. Are there any? Are there any? I mean, as this is going to be hopefully archived on the library's YouTube channel, are there any shout outs you want to give, or any?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I should have prepared for this. So first, my agent, Michelle Richter, who found me with on the DV Pit contest and, stuck with me all this time. My amazing editor, Allison Dasho. My amazing, wonderful PR woman, Kathleen Carter. My mom. Hi, Mom. And my family, my uncle. Happy birthday, Uncle Larry. I love you, Uncle Brian. My family in Florida. God, if I say more people's names, then I'm going to have to get up my pen name. But I am so grateful. My amazing, we call ourselves the writing group of awesomeness, who saw me through the initial writing process. But writing feels like a solitary process, but really no one writes alone. No one publishes a book alone. And it's probably so much grace and time and generosity. And oh my gosh, my wonderful husband, who literally read every draft, proofread everything, listens to me when I stop Derek Colton to say, so what would you think would happen if, and then explain my entire plot with him over dinner. And I love you so much. I'm so grateful for you. I have a wonderful, beautiful support system that allows me to take time to do this from my kitchen table. And I'm intensely grateful for all of them.
That's awesome. Does anybody else have any last minute burning questions? Okay. Well, Eden, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad that we could premiere the book, as it were, in the backyard of PG County.
Can I take the last minute to just also thank my fellow writer friends? Okay, I am part of a little group chat of awesome fellow debut authors. Jennifer Bardsley, Alyssa Dickey, Camille Until, Camille Baker. Camille Until is her Instagram handle. Sarah Cofino, Kate Miles, and Nancy Shaw. They all have books that are either out now, already out. And did I say Paulette Kennedy? And Paulette Kennedy, her book just came out. Again, I have to thank my mentor, Denise Williams, who is getting me through this process, and all my fellow writers who were very kind to me. Instagram is actually not a bad place to be a writer. Scared of it, scared of Twitter, a little scared of TikTok, but Instagram's okay. And the Rhyme Once Book Fest, who I actually just did some stuff with them this fall, and they are been some of the most supportive folks after I've looked up with them. They're a local organization. They had a book festival at Marion Mansion early in the fall, and
cool.
I got to do a virtual talk with them, and they again are super supportive of developing writers. So all my writer friends, Priscilla, who wrote Love, oh my gosh, the Low Country Bride, and Mon Gabrielle, who are my current critique partners. I think that's everyone I'm doing stuff with currently, but they are all wonderful, wonderful people, and they all write good books, and people should be.
If you want, email me later, and I'll see if they're in our system or not, if we can get them added
We
in.
definitely do.
And yeah, as Kayla said, PGCMLS did partner with the Right Women Book Festival. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Eden. And just a quick last note, if you want to join us on Wednesday, December 1st at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., we'll be hosting Sufia Abdur Rahman with her book Heir to the Crescent Moon, and that will also be co-presented with the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Eden.
Thank you.
Hope everyone has a good night. Take care.
This is the drill.